Hypo Shoes. Now, I'm not talking about, hyperactive. I'm talking about hypochondria. Do you know anyone who's a hypochondriac? Unfortunately, yes, I do. And I'm sure that you've come across some in your day, and hopefully you don't have any in your life at the moment, but they do tend to kind of crop up in our lives, don't they? And my question for you, it might even be you, if you're going to be honest with yourself, put your hand on your heart and say, do you know what, I am a little bit of a hypo. And there's a benefit to this. So this goes back to that whole thing of there's a positive intention behind every behavior. And one of the things that I have found over the years when working with hypochondriacs is that there's an incentive for them to be sick. Okay, and it normally stems from early childhood with attachment trauma, typically where one of the primary caregivers or both, depending on the situation, don't tend to give attention to the child unless they are extremely unwell or, unwell or extremely unwell is what I'm trying to say. So there's a benefit of them getting attention. So even though it's I had one lady who came through and saw me, and it was really interesting. She always had like a broken arm, or a sore foot, or there was always some kind of bandage on her. Like there was always some major, illness, and it wasn't sort of lightweight stuff. It was like exotic diseases. It wasn't just I've got a disease. It was an exotic disease, and you're like, well, really, like. You're living in New Zealand. How many exotic diseases can you get in New Zealand? I mean, I just, you do kind of question. It's like, I would understand, like coming out of Africa, if you'd even paid a visit to Africa, that's where all the exotic diseases are, or maybe in, the Amazon jungle or whatever the case may be. So there was a big question mark already straight off the bat when she started coming in and saying, oh, I've got this, and it literally was a list. I've got this kind of disease, I've got that kind of thing. I'm on the benefit because I've got, I can't work full time, I got this genetic disease. There was something else. She always had flu. Her arms were, she had an arm in a bandage or a foot in a bandage. There was always something, and quite often multiple. And it brings on that question of like, how do you get to be that bad? Like what happened, So really, when we looked into it, there were several things going on for her. One was that she didn't have a belief system around that she was able to support herself. So by being able to be sick meant that her parents would always be able to provide for her, that somebody else would always provide for her, that the government would even provide for her. So she never would actually have to work. So there was another payoff. So remember, we were talking about payoff shoes. It's like, what's the payoff for her? She doesn't have to work. She's got other people looking after her. What's more is she gets attention. So the other thing that we spotted was that she got attention, even though it was negative attention, she was still getting attention, and attention's attention, right? It didn't matter. So what she learned when she was growing up is that after a while, which is what happens, people start numbing out. Like they start droning out the story, because they're like, honestly, this is too much. Every single time I see you or her or whatever, she just is so negative. It's all about sickness and illness and unhealthiness and poor me, and it's so awful, and I'm struggling, and it's hard work, which leads people into that, oh, you're in energy vampire mode. It's like, it's hard work hanging out with her. And this is what she sort of started realizing, was that the reason that she was lonely was because her rhetoric, her story, her hypo shoes were on so much that it was too much for people to handle. So Tony Robbins talks a lot about this, as like, people move more towards a reward than they do. There's reward and there's pain, right? People will do whatever they possibly can to move away from pain. If you inflict too much pain on a person in a relationship, whether it's like someone you're dating, or even in a friendship, or even at work, it doesn't matter. If you inflict too much pain on that person by being negative, by being an energy vampire, by complaining the whole time, having victim shoes on, talking about poor me the whole time, talking about my hypo shoes, you know, I'm sick, I'm debilitated, you have to do more, you must, I can't, etc., etc. Where's the giving in that? It's energy draining, isn't it? I mean, like, it feels heavy even just talking about it, doesn't it? So it's that whole thing, like, of how can we not be that person, and if we are being that person, go hands up, do you know what, I do wear my hypo shoes, and why do I wear them? And it's quite often because you've learned it somewhere in your early childhood, or in your childhood days, that being a certain way you would get the attention, and even though it's negative, I'm still, which is the payoff. It's the payoff shoes, isn't it? It's like, if I'm really sick, then I get lots of attention. That's what the association was for her. So being in a hospital bed was like, suddenly she wasn't lonely. Suddenly people were coming to visit. Suddenly mum and dad were paying attention. Suddenly they were coming to see her every single day. Then they were looking after her when she got home. Then they were giving her food and making her food rather than her having to do it herself. There was a serious payoff. So often with hypochondriacs, there's a payoff for it. So what is it? So being aware of that is one thing, and noticing who's got their hypo shoes on, and maybe you've got hypo shoes, or what is it that got you to wear them in the first place? What's the driver? What's the if we do the shoes off, what's really going on scenario? What made that happen? Where did you decide that was the appropriate pair of shoes to wear? Where did you go, like, actually, do you know what, I noticed that I did that when I was this age, and this age. I fell off my bike, I got attention from mum and dad. I fell off the horse and I broke my arm, and I got even more attention from mum and dad. I went swimming and I dived off the board and I broke my leg, and I got more attention from mum and dad. So whatever it is, and you'll start noticing that you've stacked, or they have stacked, several scenarios to the point where now I actually have to be really sick and I get more attention. That's the association that they've made. So can you see how it all sort of pans out? So try and work it out. And even if it's not you, if it's somebody else, ask them, like, that's interesting, like, that you feel that's you always seem to be sick or whatever. Where does that come from? Get them to question. Sometimes they don't want to, they're hanging on to it too tight, and you won't be able to shift it. And if they don't want to change it, they just won't. It's like anything in life. If they haven't reached their threshold, they just won't do it, will they? So, but some people will go, do you know what, that's interesting. And I do remember, even with another person, and it was a man, it actually got to the point where I started asking different questions. Instead of asking, how are you today? Because then I would get the story. I would go, what good things happened for you today? So I was changing the question to something that would force his brain down a positive road. So it would be, what good things, like, oh, I'm so pleased to see that you're really well and that you were able to go on your bike ride. This means that you're doing really well. Forcing the brain to go down the positive, not the negative. So I had actually stopped asking, how are you, and swapped it for, what good things happened for you today? I noticed that you went for a walk, or you went skiing. This is great. This means that your health is really great, that it's actually improving. Now, initially, it's kind of yet a bit of a color change thing going on, and because the cogs are kind of grinding in the opposite direction, and they're like going, ooh, and you can even see a color change sometimes in their face. And they go, whatever. But it's helping to, uncross those wires, like disconnect the negative, so that they can start going, actually, do you know what? I am more healthy than I am unhealthy. Why don't I start focusing on that? So there's two things there. One is, do you wear the hypo shoes, and getting an understanding of why people wear them. And then the second thing is, like, understanding what the game is helps us to challenge somebody who is playing that game if they're coming into our environment. So there's two useful things right there. I hope you found that useful. If you did, please like, share, subscribe. make some comments. And yeah, we'll see you tomorrow. Your shoes, your path, your way. Namaste.